just to maximize our time and efficiency.
Okay.
Do you think it's actually better if we just go back to the old division of labor where you clean and cook and I'll go bring home the bacon and all that stuff? Do you think
I enjoy contributing to a relationship financially, and I enjoy what I do.
Why does that come back to a type of scorekeeping where we're actually saying, hey, I go out and I earn the money and I mow the lawn and I take out the trash. And if anything breaks around the house, I fix it. Therefore, I'm off the hook for everything else. And I'm not saying that it's not a valid argument. I don't necessarily agree with it. The part that kind of gets me is, why is it a problem if you are doing more?
I think it's just like you feel tired and you feel unseen. People do stuff and not necessarily wanting to be appreciated, but you do want to be appreciated. And so when I'm feeling like I'm doing more, it comes from a place of I'm not feeling fully appreciated.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Interracial Couple Podcast.
Where it's not all black and white. My name is Sarah, I'm black.
I'm Matthew, I'm white. And this week we are diving into how chores are ruining our relationship.
Yep. So
I think the big question is, who does more chores?
Of course.
I
do. Oh my God, you beat me to that.
Well, yeah, if I didn't, then I would be on the defensive. I'd rather be on the offensive anytime.
But I just want to say that I do more.
Yeah, you definitely do more.
Maybe a couple weeks ago, we decided that we were going to split our chores because there was you feeling like you do more of the cooking and I feeling like I do the dishes, I do the laundry. And of course, those things take more time. I do the shopping and my work wasn't as rewarded. So we have split the chores.
I just want to kind of back up for a second. When you just kind of think about it objectively, does that really feel like that's the issue, that you're not appreciated or that it takes more time and all that? Does that actually objectively feel true?
No.
Okay.
It just feels like it, but I know if I look at it, I don't.
And I think that's really key because I kind of feel the same way. Well, we were talking about this morning and it was do you really feel like you do more? And in the moment, sometimes I do. In the moment, actually more than sometimes I do. But if I have to stop and be really objective about it, I can't say that I do. But if you were do I do more? I would say, no, I don't think you do more. I actually think we had a decent flow. Now, was it totally even? Who knows? But even if it's not, as we know, and it's kind of relationship 101, scorekeeping is bad. Relationship 102 is everybody does it anyways. Right?
Yeah. So I feel like what we've done is realize that we both feel at times that each one of us does more.
Here's the thing, and we'll come back to this at the end, but A, is that a problem to be doing more?
Okay.
And B, if you are doing more at any particular time, to me, it's a little bit like the ebb and flow of the ocean. Sometimes it's high tide and sometimes it's low tide. And life has so much of that, is that sometimes you do more. Sometimes I do more. And if we take this little snapshot, and that's a little bit why I was pressing you earlier about this question of I do all the shopping. You've only had a car that you've used separately from me for 2 weekends in a row.
Okay. Let's talk about the shopping.
Okay, let's talk about shopping.
On Saturday, I wanted to make cornbread and I've started cooking because you are feeling like you are doing more of the cooking. So I've picked up more slack in the cooking.
Yeah.
I've been doing more of the cooking now.
Well, now it's even because we know this because we have a schedule. And I just need to say, just for the record.
Okay, this is what's happening. I make more complicated meals that you've been using for leftovers. So I'm doing more.
Once again, actually, and that kind of perfectly illustrates this idea that as soon as something happens, whatever the most recent thing is that happens becomes I do it all the time.
Okay, but on Saturday, what happened was we both left the house at the same time.
Yes.
And I went to 5 stores. I wanted to make cornbread. I went to the dollar store to get some cleaning something that I needed there. And then I left and I went to Trader Joe's, which is where we do most of our shopping. They didn't have everything that I needed for the cornbread. So I walked over to the Mexican store. The Mexican store didn't have everything that I needed. So I walked over to another big store. Don't remember the name. But at the end of it all, it was like 3 hours of my time.
Yeah. And not just 3 fun hours. It wasn't like 3 hours of, meditative work, even on the house or in the yard or something like that. It was like,
and it was raining and cold. And so I was so frustrated coming back, and I had not eaten breakfast because I left at 9. I was hungry, I was cold, and I just felt like, oh my God, I am doing more shopping.
yeah. And now because during that moment, it was so frustrating. And because you had gone shopping the weekend before, because I was out of town, that meant all of a sudden in the 4 years of our relationship, you have automatically done most of the shopping.
But let's be honest, like I've done most of our food shopping since the beginning of our relationship because you don't like going shopping. I do most of the food shopping. Okay. I notice when we're running out of food and you don't notice.
Okay. All
and
right.
So
I couldn't disagree more, but we're going to go with that.
Okay. And so we came up with a system of how to tackle our household chores so that I'm not feeling resentful and you're not feeling resentful.
So let's talk about that. Yeah. So you came up with a really good idea. It was like basically it was pretty simple, like every other day. You cook, I cook. I actually kind of like it, though it did cause for at least one meltdown during that period of time. But it was on like my day, I do everything. I get up, I make the bed, I make the coffee, I make the breakfast, I wash the dishes, I make the dinner. If we're working from our office, not in the house, I pack the stuff. On your days, you do the same thing. But I don't have to do anything. I don't have to wash any dishes. I don't have to cook. You make the coffee. You make the bed. I can get up and I can go on my phone. I can start working. I can do whatever I want and I just don't have to worry about it. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so today is my day. I woke up, made the bed, made the coffee, made a huge breakfast.
Which was wonderful. And I got to feel so taken care of.
And today I feel like I do more.
No, too bad, which is funny because normally it would have been yesterday, but you were so cranky about doing too much yesterday. I was like, I'm going to do it today and you can do it tomorrow.
Yeah. I think it's working, dividing chores that equally. Mm-hmm. Now it just is like, no, like today is my day. Like I'm doing everything, but I'm not sure that actually is going to work in the long term. There's some things that just come easy to me. I was like watching you make the bed yesterday. I came to your rescue.
Because you think I take too long.
You take too long and you don't make it well.
But how am I ever going to get as good at you unless I practice? But the flip side of that, and we talked about this on an earlier episode, is that one of the ways that married couples or long-term partners maximize their abilities is that I do the things that I'm naturally better at and you do the things you're naturally better at, because if you can make the bed in a minute and it takes me 4, over the course of our lifetime, that's a lot of minutes that you might as well just make the bed. And then cooking, for example, I can whip up a meal much more quickly than you can. Even today, you made this wonderful breakfast. The reality is I would have made it in half the time.
Yeah.
Right? But how do you actually get better at those things? And so I think there's a little bit of a balance between making sure we each get an opportunity to improve those things, and also why waste your time doing something that I'm better at, and why should I waste my time doing something that you're better at, so we can actually each do our best things, as it were. Just have more time to ourselves, more free time, more time to make love.
But I think that for us has been the issue. Even though you're good at cooking, it became something that you was resenting to do. And for me, like, I am so efficient when it comes to like cleaning dishes and making the bed and doing the laundry. I do those things faster than you do. And I'm like really good at organizing, but it got to a point where you felt like, oh my God, all the cooking is left for me to do. Which in most part it was, but you do it faster.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that, so I think that kind of comes into one of the things we were talking about earlier was how important is it when we kind of got together, we had this really direct and frank conversation. We have to be careful about the patterns that we put into motion, because early on, those are going to become the expectations. And then if we end up not feeling good about it, how do we break out of it? And the resentment around me cooking, for example, came from that, like, there were times where like we were out for really long days and we were both exhausted, and it would naturally fall on me because we know that I could whip up a good meal in, say, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it would take you 2 or 3 times longer. So it didn't make sense for you to do it. But I just was like, now at a certain point, it kind of built up to the point where then I was like, I'm stuck in this pattern that I don't want to be in. And now I'm not doing it out of freedom, and I'm not doing it out of sort of what I loved about it, which is that I love cooking for you. I mean, when our first date, I invited you over to my house and I cooked you a special meal, and I love doing that. And I love having you just be like, oh, this is so good. I feel good. And so therefore, when that became a problem, it was really disappointing on 2 sides, right? Because now I'm carrying resentment around something that I actually love doing and love doing for you.
And then when you start carrying the resentment, it's like, I don't appreciate the food as much.
And all of the food is then tainted by the resentment of maybe it's not always, right? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I so agree. So it became like this thing where it's like, okay, you do the cooking, but I'm not really like that grateful because I could sense it and I could feel it, where it's like, I don't want you to do it. You know, like unless you're doing it from a place of love, then I don't want you to do it. And so I want to know how to cook because I also want that feeling of like me serving you food.
And I love it so much. And
I wish I would say that I love cooking. Cooking is so stressful for me.
Yeah. I'm so glad that I'm giving you the opportunity to improve on it. So that way someday you can cook for me with all the love and none of the stress. So
yeah, I think I need to like cook. Like when I lived alone, I used to cook on like certain days. I think I should start cooking in the evening and like make a couple meals and drink wine as I'm doing it to reduce the stress. Yeah, but it's really something that's stressful for me.
Yeah. I think one of the things that is overlooked sometimes in how we deal with this is that as we move towards equality, which is actually what we want, I think in general, a relationship is better when there's equality.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like if you don't have equality in a relationship, then you could be kind of like if the Lakers were playing some high school basketball team, it would not be fun. You know, part of what's fun is that there's actually parity, there's equality, and that in, say, men's professional sports, you know, and that's what makes it exciting. That's what means some teams win and some teams lose, and they can kind of go back and forth. So that's what's exciting about it. But it does make it a challenge. It means that a good team is going to lose sometimes. So taking that same analogy like into our relationship is that, you know, yeah, when we actually have this equality, it means that things aren't necessarily going to be as simple because we don't just have this, like we can't project exactly how it's going to be. So we have to work things out. And I think that's a really great thing. But we also, if we don't acknowledge that it comes with challenges, serious challenges for both sides, then we can kind of start looking back and saying, actually, before equality, when we had a very clear division of labor, that was better. You know, and it was better only because you never had to argue about who's cooking dinner. Like literally you go back 100 years ago and
not even 100 years ago in America, but some places still today in the world, it's like the division of labor is so clear about who does what that it's not even a topic of conversation.
Yeah. When we go to your aunt and uncle's house, for example, there was never a question of should your uncle get up and make tea?
No.
That was never a question.
It's not a question.
And how nice is that in some ways, right? To know that we just know. And you know what? Who had to make sure the bills got paid?
My uncle.
And that was never a question. Your aunt never just like, oh my gosh, how are we going to like pay for the electricity? It just wasn't her responsibility.
Yeah. So even how to define what equality is, you know, is like, I think that's in the modern world where you start keeping score. Because you're like, I'm doing this. Like, what is that place where it's actually equal?
Right. And now we want to do that. And then we do a thing of like assigning values. So like I hear a lot of times in some of my men's stuff is like men will say, you know, hey, you know, I'm doing all this other stuff, so I shouldn't have to do these other things. As though earning money in a job outside of the household now has greater value than cooking dinner. Yeah. And I'll tell you right now, if you ate out every night and you had a really good personally made meal every night, that you couldn't afford that.
No, you could not.
You have a personal chef to come and make a meal that you know you're going to like and bring it to your home.
You know, like a clean bed and sheets. It's like living at a hotel. Like you leave, you come back, everything is done for you. Like I feel like that probably should be paid more, but apparently men do feel like in terms of like being paid and coming home, like that is doing more. And also the women feel like my work is invisible. I'm not being paid in cash.
Yeah.